Hi, I'm Ami Devereaux. If we think about an organization, there's a strategy, and then every single individual within the organization is there to contribute some specific kind of value to the organization. And the way that we sort of bucket those areas of value is by function. So we have functions like sales or marketing, engineering, um, product, and so forth. There's all these different buckets of function. And that tends to be kind of the way we look at organizations as this collection of functional areas, each of which contributes value to the organization. And then we hope that everybody will work in coordination and cooperation to actually fulfill the strategy. But let's dig down a little bit deeper because this is something I've been seeing a lot in both my consulting and my executive coaching work, especially with high growth startups where there's this massive demand on the employees to accomplish a really, really difficult goal fast. And to really look at what the impediments are to this, you need to dig beneath the function. So if we take every individual and the kind of value that they're meant to produce and contribute to the company, you can break it down to another level that I'm going to call functional activity. So if you imagine that you have this one circle that is the value that the individual is meant to contribute, and that's expressed in terms of the contribution to the strategy or the goals. And then you have this other area called the functional area, which is the particular kind of cog in the machine and how it makes the machine work. If you overlap those two areas, you get an area of intersection in the middle, and that's functional activity. Now, functional activities are kind of a harbinger of the time and motion studies that happened way back at the beginning of efficiency studies in management. But we're looking at them from a completely different lens. And in fact, the very term functional activity is a term of art that I think I made up, but maybe somebody else did. I'm not claiming any pride of ownership. Anyway, functional activity is the actual constituent pieces of the work that you do. So if you're in sales, then you probably make phone calls, send emails, send follow-up emails, go to networking events, go to industry conferences. And if you look at that whole amalgamation of very specific activities, let's just say we could call them all something like relating or conversations, having conversations. And it's a very social function, it's a very engaged function. Now let's look at a different area of the organization. Let's say we look at content production, so a portion of marketing responsible for producing content on a website. I do a little bit of that, right? I'm doing that now, and I do that when I write. So that activity is very, very different from the talking, relating, networking, conversing function. It's actually a thinking, researching, editing, drafting, redrafting, re-editing function. Now, they take up very different kinds of cognitive energy, don't they? So if you're going to do stuff on the content production side, your functional activity, which is the writing, editing, researching, and so forth, is a very cognitively demanding activity that involves deep thinking, research, and what I would call sort of solitary deep work. It's the kind of work that you can't really get into in just a second. You need some time to dig into it and get into a groove to be in a state of flow. And that really is best accommodated by multiple hours of uninterrupted concentration. And that means time. So the functional activity of deep work likely requires uninterrupted time. On the other hand, the activity of conversing, the functional activity that makes up sales, or often that may even make up the work of the CEO if he or she is trying to raise money and doing a lot of pitches and having a lot of conversations with prospective investors. Again, a functional activity pool that's made up largely of conversing. Those two kinds of activities, the functional activities of sales and of CEOs looking for funding, are largely quick change. You can easily context shift. You're going from one conversation to the next, and it doesn't take an awfully long time to get into the flow of the next conversation. That's just the nature of how human beings are wired up, right? Social activity and conversing, for the most part, doesn't take a lot of preparation unless you are a severe introvert, whereas deep work that requires research and thinking and problem solving often does require open-ended blocks of time for that functional activity to be successful. Now, you hope that in an organization, as I said, everybody is coordinated and cooperating, but can that really happen if every individual does not fully understand the functional activity of every other individual? If the sales team doesn't really empathize and appreciate and understand what it takes for the content production team to do their job, and vice versa, if the content production team or the engineering team doesn't really understand, empathize, and appreciate with what it takes for the sales team to successfully bring in revenue and produce their value, then there's a kind of disconnect. And that disconnect, especially when it is pervasive between many functional areas and other functional areas, does not allow for coordination. In fact, the very organization of the team itself can begin to cannibalize the effectiveness and therefore the value contribution of its colleagues. So this is something really worth thinking about, because what does it take to have each individual within an organization actually understand, appreciate, and empathize with the functional activity of every other entity in the organization? That means understanding the strategy, understanding the value that every individual function is meant to contribute, and then even deeper, understanding the moment by moment behavior that comprises the activities that lead to that value, and what conditions make it possible for each individual to contribute their greatest amount of value with the least amount of obstruction. That's what I'm thinking about. So in my next week's article, I will be writing about this in a little bit more depth, with some how-tos on how best to facilitate an organization in which the conditions are proper for everybody to have that kind of empathy and appreciation, which leads to some very interesting outcomes, including people having more time to do the right work, to contribute their real value and accelerate the process of accomplishing goals. I hope this has been useful. I'm Ami Devereaux. Please join my community at www.beyondbetter.online. It's free, no trolls, no ads, just us discussing leadership, strategy, decision-making, critical thinking, and whatever else comes up under that umbrella, but no politics, no personality stuff, and none of that other nonsense that nobody enjoys. Also, visit my website, beyondbetter.io, subscribe to the blog so you make sure you get the letter in your inbox every other week. And then, of course, in the alternate weeks, you'll get this video sort of giving you a preview of the next newsletter. Thank you so much. I hope you'll subscribe to my channel, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.